All right, welcome everybody. I'd like to introduce Pamela Garfield-Jaeger. Known as the Truthful Therapist, Pamela is a California licensed social worker with over 20 years of experience. She has worked in a variety of settings, including schools, clinics, residential programs, and hospitals. In 2022, she publicly started questioning the direction the mental health field is going. Pamela believes in working collaboratively with families when treating minors. She also values treating patients holistically rather than using a one-size-fits-all approach. In addition, she doesn't make assumptions about people based on the color of their skin. Plus, she knows people need therapy to work through underlying issues, and blind affirmation is not ethical. Finally, Pamela believes in empowering patients and not reinforcing victim mentality. Pamela graduated from New York University in 1999 with her master's in social work and completed a master's in public administration in 2003. She has been licensed in California since 2005, and Pamela has starred in 3 documentaries about the harms of gender medicine. And if you're registered for this webinar, you received a PDF copy of her book, A Practical Response to Gender Distress, Tips and Tools for Families, which I am sorry I don't have a copy of that with me, but I do have her other book, Froggy Girl, which is, oh, there it is. Thank you for showing us that. So there's her book for parents and families dealing with this issue. And Froggy Girl is an adorable book about a little girl who thinks she's a frog, but she gets told the truth that while it's fun to pretend to be a frog, she's actually a little girl, and that is a great thing to be. So welcome, Pamela. Thank you so much for coming today. And I'm going to turn off my video and just let you have the floor.
Thank you. That was a wonderful introduction. And for those that don't know, one of those 3 documentaries, Maria and I are both in. We are both stars of Disconnected. So if you have not seen it, it is now free on YouTube. I don't know if you knew that, Maria, that uh now I'm like his name, Don Johnson, the filmmaker, put it for free on YouTube. So you can look at that if you want to see the movie stars that
Great.
we
I
are.
did not know that. Thanks, Pamela.
Yeah. You have to see the ads if you don't have an account, but yeah, it's for free. So, Maria asked me to do this training on helping families with adult children who identify as transgender. And as you all know, this is not an easy topic, but I wanted to be able to lend my wisdom to you and also to help empower you because a lot of what I have to say is about you using your own instincts. And that's a lot of, I think that's my philosophy in general. For those that like follow me online and know what I have to say, a lot of it is about not going straight to an expert and looking at it directly, but getting information and then making your own evaluations. So I just wanted to put that out there. Um, oh no, I thought I could press, okay, I'm not good at this. All right. So a little bit about me, we had the introduction, so I'll just go through this quickly. I guess you got all this information. So I never was a gender expert. I think that's a good thing. I think the people that were gender experts are the ones that are doing all the harm, probably the harm that your own family experienced. What I am is just a regular therapist that work with teens and families. So what I have to say is comes from that. It comes from my general clinical experience and expertise. I was also a clinical supervisor for many years for other therapists coming up the ranks. And really, if you ever talk to a therapist, you should look at what their skills are as a therapist because being a gender specialist is not going to help. Being a person that can look at the whole family and the whole child is what we need, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Also, just so you know why I got into this or how I got into this, I I had a huge physical disability for about 5 years. I came back to work, and that's when I saw how things had radically shifted in the year 2021. And then they actually mandated me to take the COVID vaccine. And after my health issues, I chose not to. So that emboldened me to be quite vocal about this subject. And that's how I landed here. So okay, the first thing I want to tell you guys is to not lose hope and that you never know what the future will bring. I talked to a lot of parents who are really feeling hopeless and scared, and I mean, it's a very valid, very valid feeling. But you really just never know. And you never know what's going to change your child's mind. You never know what's going to what's going to happen politically and culturally. And then also, it's never too late. So I've seen a lot of detransitioners, have been through different stages of their transition, have had surgeries, but they turn out okay. Obviously, there's harm that's been done. We know that, but it's all hope is not lost. So I really want you to remember that as you talk to interact with your child, or just think about it and go through your everyday and are struggling with this issue. And then, of course, remember that your love matters so much. And no matter what you do, you love your child. And if as long as you continue to express that, even though they might say they hate you or even not even talk to you, that it still matters. And you're not doing nothing. Simply by loving them, you are doing something very important. Okay, so this is what I was talking about before. So my biggest philosophy about this is gender is not about gender. In fact, it's just a symptom of something else. And I just want people to think about that when they're talking to their trans-identified person, that they are making this all about trans often, but it's not. And as a therapist, the way therapists always used to be is we would look under the surface whenever there was something. We looked at substance abuse, we looked at other symptoms, we would recognize there was usually something else going on. So when you're talking to your loved one, to recognize that there are underlying issues, and that's what you should be thinking about, and that's how you would communicate with them. And you would address it based on those underlying causes rather than getting into a match about what the pronouns are and what their identity is and all of that. Because I think that's partly what it's intentional. It's what keeps you all divided. And, we know this is about dividing families, and focusing so much on this superficial gender stuff stops us from really addressing the underlying issues. And of course, I just wanted to say this out loud. No one is born in the wrong body. I'm not going to do a big lecture on that. I think everyone in this webinar already believes that. So we're recognizing that no one is born this way, and something happened or something is going on with that individual for them to believe that. Of course, they've probably been indoctrinated, but usually there's a vulnerability that has led them there. So always recognize that. So here are some examples. I think you guys are probably all familiar with it, and you're probably thinking about the person that you love who is trans-identified and already thinking about what they're struggling with. So here are some main examples of what could be an underlying influence or a vulnerability that would lead someone to believe that they're trans. The first one I'm going to emphasize, because that's something you might have more control over because it's something you might have been involved with, which is some family conflict or family struggles or loss that you might have experienced together, issues with the other sibling, a health issue within the family. And so those are oftentimes that's when the child falls into this trans identity, is when there's a big crisis within the family. And sometimes those wounds are still there. And when the person still feels those wounds, they're going to hang on to the trans identity even harder. So I wanted to emphasize that. But here's some more. Of course, autism, we know kids who are autistic fall into this for several reasons, which Maria talks about really well in that movie Disconnected. How they have rigid thinking and they're online and they have struggles socially. There's lots of different factors in that. And then, of course, we know sexual trauma, health struggles. I identify with this myself because I had such bad health struggles, and it was very isolated and kind of was at war with my body. And if you think about somebody who is at war with their body, they might want to believe that they were born in the wrong body and be more dissociated with their body. So that's, I think, a big reason why someone would feel they're trans, or at least want to be trans, to resolve some of that pain. And then overexposure or early exposure to porn or graphic sexual content, social isolation, social struggles, feeling invisible. I think we all know that these are I'm guessing that's probably common among almost all of the people that that they started feeling those feelings and then becoming trans help them be more seen and more acknowledged and get their flags and their parades and be seen by other people in their life. I don't think we talk enough about the medicalization, not just the hormones and the surgeries, but other medicalization, like psychotropic drugs like SSRIs and overdiagnosing and identifying too much with labels, that can go both ways. Labels can help us, but labels can hinder. And I think sometimes that plays a role in this. So if your person is on a lot of SSRIs and psychotropic drugs, that might have been a factor in them feeling really dissociated or being at odds with their sexuality, and so it's just something to consider. The failure to launch, avoidance, fear of growing up, that is a very common feeling these days among our culture, I think, and unfortunately, it's sometimes enabled. And it's also just a general cultural feeling. I remember more the millennial generation talking about not wanting to be not adulting and kind of making fun of it, and it felt kind of silly, but I think it's really morphed into something that has become dysfunctional, where kids are no longer wanting to grow up. They're no longer they're afraid of becoming the man or woman that they should be, for lots of different reasons. Unfettered access to internet when they're too young, which we know most of them get indoctrinated that way. And then the social justice ideas, wanting either needing to be a victim or, feeling though that might protect them if they became trans. Avoid being a white supremacist. A lot of white kids really fall into this. A lot of boys don't want to be that toxic, masculine rape culture guy that they're told that they inevitably will become. So these are just some ideas of why someone might become or believe that they're trans, and these kinds of issues are the things to think about. And then there's lots more I think you might be thinking to yourself about the individual that you love, why they have fallen into it. And I think those are the things that you need to talk to them about if you have that relationship, and not even think about the trans, at least not initially. Um, so I actually just read Maria's book that's coming out, and one of the pieces in her book that I really enjoyed was it was really referring to working with teens or talking to your teenager, but I think it goes across the board, especially young adults who may be stuck in adolescence, is to do more listening than lecturing. You're gonna have to bite your tongue, and that's probably really hard, especially when you know that they're making bad choices and you know that they're in this cult-like mentality that doesn't even make sense. But a lot of this, I think too, is about being seen and being noticed and all of that. And a lot of that is unhealthy, needing to be seen, but underneath it, there's something that got them there. And when you listen and you're curious, then you can connect with them and you can get to the parts where they maybe might be able to hear you someday, hopefully. And this does not mean you need to agree or affirm, but also listen. And depending on your relationship, I would do more listening than lecturing. Um, Also connecting on other subjects. I think that's kind of an obvious thing, but I think we sometimes forget that, and to just try to let it go and connect on other things. Get to know your loved one in other ways, like just maybe sit and listen to music together that they like, or do an art project together, or you play a sport together, or do something outdoors. It depends on their personality and what they like. Of course, it depends on your relationship and your access, whether or not they're even talking to you. So there's all different variables here, but these are the ideas. Um, so yeah, doing something physical helps them become more embodied, and getting away from screens, as I think we all agree, is really beneficial. Here's something that's honestly can be really difficult, but thinking about what you might have been responsible for. Obviously, I'm not blaming anybody for this. However, there are vulnerabilities and there are aspects. Quite frankly, this is what's so evil about this agenda, is that every family has hurts. Every family goes through things. And what the trans agenda does is swoops in at the time that you're most vulnerable and, indoctrinates your child to believe that they're trans and pulls them away from you. And instead of dealing with whatever that crisis was, like, a divorce or cancer in the family, or a time that maybe you were depressed and weren't just couldn't be there for your child the way you would have wanted to be, then the trans activists come in and tell your child that they love their child more than you do. It's just awful. Um, However, those are the things to think about. What are the things that you maybe did have some responsibility for, and acknowledge the genuine hurts that your loved one experienced, and and express that to them. I think this is a little bit of a, we know this is an attention seeking behavior, and in some ways they're looking for that acknowledgement of, like, why didn't you do this for me? Why aren't you there for me? Why did you pay so much attention to my brother, who was, the star football player, and not to me? Or when you were really depressed, like, I didn't know what to do, and I had to take care of all this stuff, or whatever. But to really have some humility and think about what you could apologize for. Obviously, don't apologize for things you're not responsible for, but think about what you did have responsibility for, and at the very least acknowledge things that are very real hurts for that person. Because that might disarm them a bit, so that they don't keep telling you that you're a bigot and all those awful things that they've been brainwashed to believe. Okay, so developmental age. I put this in here because um, it really has a lot to do with how we communicate with your adult child. So we're talking about adults, but I've talking to a lot of families and knowing a lot of young adults that are either already in the, still believing they're trans, or even detransitioners developmentally. They're still a lot younger than they would be if they hadn't been through this, for, several reasons. It might have been the vulnerability that got them there, but also the trans identity itself stunts their social and emotional development. Because in a way they become so obsessed about being trans that they're no longer doing what normal kids do, which is, dating and thinking about what they're going to do when they grow up, and get maybe wanting to be in an apartment, getting their driver's license, just doing the things that you do when you're growing up as a teenager and young adult. Those things kind of get left out because there's so much obsession about the trans. Um, and I actually compare this a lot to addiction. So if anybody has ever known anybody who has a severe addiction, oftentimes when they get sober, in certain ways, they're kind of stuck at the age of when they started using. And I think this is a very similar dynamic. And so these are just some things to think about as you're trying to communicate with somebody who you'd like to pull them out of this behavior that is harmful, and also just connect with them. So think about their developmental age, and you might have different expectations of someone who's 15 versus 25, and just thinking about that. Okay, this is a sticky one. I've talked to several parents who have reached out to me for consultation, and this is an issue that's come up a lot, which is the financial support. And in certain families, we figured out that the parents were still enabling the trans identity because they were financially supporting them, and they were kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place because, of course, they don't want their child to be on the street, or um, be abandoned, but at the same time giving them their credit free use of credit cards, giving them a card with car insurance, paying for their internet or their phone, or even paying for all the stuff at college, that where they're being transitioned at college, became really sticky when they were realizing that their kid was being turned directly against them and radicalized against them. And so they really had to consider whether or not they were funding this transition, and what and how they could not enable it. Again, I'm not going to tell you exactly what to do. These are all things for you to consider and think about what you want to do and what is appropriate. But I would think about, if you are really financially supporting them, how you could set those limits and set a plan with that person so that you are not doing that. And I know this is not an easy thing to consider, especially if you know that they can't support themselves. But it's also, I think it's an important thing to consider. Okay, so, and I know not everybody has this. However, I think probably this organization and other organizations have helped with this, which is bringing in support so that you're not on your own. And the ideal is that you have trusted adults within your family or family friends, people that your adult child knows or has known when they were younger that agree with you. And I know that's sometimes not possible because sometimes what happens is your entire family turns against you. And I know that. And that's what's extra hard and evil about this entire thing is that you just want the truth and you just want your adult child to be healthy and whole. And people think that you're a bigot for that. Um, However, the tide is turning and I task you to do some outreach and really think about and dig deep and find other people that can be your reinforcement, that can support you and support what you believe in and, support really your adult child that is making an unhealthy choice, both psychologically and physically. So, so try to not be on your own in one way or another. And if you can think of someone, work like that. I think that's an important thing is to work on bringing in reinforcement so that you are not on your own doing this. And then if you are married, if you have a spouse, working together is ideal. Again, not always possible. And that's another evil aspect of this is that custody issues, those who are affirming versus not affirming get pitted against each other. There's all these things. However, I hope for you and I encourage you to find those that can support you so that you're not on your own. And then maybe also your adult child can hear it from that other person. They might not hear it from you because you're like the fuddy-duddy mom, but they might hear it from their cool cousin, So if hopefully you can access that. I wanted to emphasize this, which is the hardest thing, which is to simultaneously not give up but also in a way let go and recognize that if as adults they need to make their own choices and to recognize again I do like to compare this to addiction that if you like thinking about that if say your loved one was actively using drugs or actively an alcoholic and in- doing destructive behaviors and you can't lock them up and you've offered them treatment over and over and they just don't follow through but they're adults and you can't do anything then what do? There is at a certain point where you do have to kind of let go of your feeling to control them. Sometimes when you do that, then they're able to make their own, acknowledge their own just self-destructive behaviors. But it's hard to say and hard to know. But you want to set the right conditions so that they know they can always come to you and you love them no matter what. But you can't control them the way, it's easier, of course, when they're minors and they're in your house and you can take away their phones and you can take away their hormones and you can take them away from Planned Parenthood and but you can't do that now. So that's something just to acknowledge. Yeah, this is my most important message that I really want to put out there to all of you and then really to the world is for you to believe in yourself and to stay steady and strong in your beliefs. It is very important. Just being strong in yourself will make a huge difference because I think actually one other broad thing that's going on is a lot of kids are becoming anxious and overwhelmed and reaching for this like faux identity because sometimes the adults don't always have that strength and leadership that kids need. We've I think we've shifted so far into this gentle parenting culture that we've lost the plot, and sometimes and now kids are, taking over, let the child lead. I'm not saying that's what you're doing. I don't know you. However, generally speaking, staying strong in your beliefs and having conviction, while still being loving and compassionate is very important. And it goes a really long way. And so even if you feel like you're doing nothing, by being strong, you're doing a lot. Also, remember that you are not hateful. You're not a phobic person. You believe in reality. You believe in health and safety. You believe in probably family, and you just do not want your child to be in this damaging environment, and be around these activists that are really like preying on their vulnerabilities. And that certainly does not make you hateful or phobic. And so you remember that, as you might be told that you're a horrible, hateful, phobic person by either the person you love or by other people in your life or by the media or by a movie or a commercial or a lot of stupid people out there. We're fighting this, broadly. And I think the tides have turned, but I know people are still getting that message directly, and it's painful. Remember that truth is not hate. In fact, lying or affirmation is the easier path. People will say, why don't you just be, accepting, and then, everything will be fine. Well, that's not true. And remember that. And give yourself credit for taking the more difficult but correct path. This is not the path of least resistance. And that's what makes you, honestly, stronger. And give yourself credit for that. I'd really like you to trust yourself and trust your instincts. And remember that you do know your child, you know your family better than anyone else. And so don't forget that, and dig deep. And if you know something's going on, what's wrong, act on that. Trust yourself. And then be kind to yourself and get help and support if needed. So I am the Truthful Therapist online, and one of the things I talk about is, to be really skeptical about therapists that have been indoctrinated, that just don't have the proper training. However, I believe that therapy can be really beneficial if it's done right, and if you are active in the process and don't blindly trust any therapist. So I encourage you to get support if you need it. Sometimes you getting the therapy will actually help your adult child. But I don't necessarily say you should get therapy. I don't think therapy is for everyone. And I think there are other ways you can get support, maybe even through church or through, through support groups, through webinars, through anything else, through friends. So now I'm just giving you a few resources. This is a Substack I did. This is like really a whole other webinar, which is, what makes a good therapist and how to find a good therapist. So I encourage you to go to my Substack, and I believe you'll be able to get these slides later, so you'll have it. But I have this long essay about what makes a good therapist, and it has very specific screening questions and ways you can find a good therapist, that if you do decide to go to therapy, or if you're a young adult becomes open to it, I wouldn't honestly push it, but if they become open to going to therapy, this is how you would find a good therapist. On the left here are two websites, conservativecounselors.com and then Open Therapy Institute. Those are two non-captured groups of people that have bravely put their names out there because they can't get doxxed. And then that's my Substack. This is a Substack I wrote, and it was published on the Pit Parents Substack publication. And it's really about how you have it in you to, you have strength, and to remember that. And I put the ruby slippers because, in the end of the end of The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy learns that she had it in herself the whole time to get herself home, that she didn't need to go to the great and powerful Oz. She could have done it on her own. And that's sort of the message. And I really wanted to hone that in. So this is not a long essay, but I just wanted to put that out there. If people are looking for some words of encouragement, I wanted you to have that. And this is my book, which you will have gotten a PDF of. And I just wanted to go over what's in there so that you know what to look for, what's in what you can get out of it. So I went over a few of the influences and underlying causes of gender distress. In my book, I go into even more details, I list more things. I break down all the major lies that the trans activists repeat, including the suicide lie. I think you guys are probably familiar with these. However, sometimes when you're flustered and you have people coming at you and you have people, you have your loved one kind of who has been trained quite well to emotionally manipulate, it's good to have it written in plain black and white so that you can know what to say or at least know what to think so that you don't get manipulated or, you don't believe that you're now the awful person that's now like causing a suicide or that there's only two genders. Yeah, but it helps you break that down a little bit. There's all that. There's more than 1%, or we don't know really how many detransitioners there are, and it breaks that down also. I've also been to several therapy trainings to educate parents on how therapists are specifically trained to manipulate parents. One way they actually say that you're going through the stages of grief and that when you don't affirm your child, that means you're in denial and you're just grieving the loss of your assist child, which is completely, it's dumb and it's wrong. But if they're saying it in such a nice, compassionate way and professional way, using all their therapy speak, it's easy to get manipulated by that. So I've written that up so that you can be armed and know that if somebody uses that language with you, you won't take that. I have a list of open-ended questions that you can start with your trans-identified person if and when they're ready to have that conversation. I don't recommend you going head on the gender thing right away, especially if your relationship is really contentious. However, I think that it can help to have some open-ended questions ready and, of course, still do it with a lot of listening and a lot of patience. How to screen for an appropriate therapist. So that Substack that I just gave you earlier is in more detail, but a lot of that stuff is in my book too. I have a little trans English dictionary, I call it, which has a lot of the lingo, which I think you probably are familiar with, but it helps to break it down because I break it down in layman's terms. I tell you how basically a lot of this language is manipulative. It includes a lot of powerful art and quotes by detransitioners who have been very generous to allow me to publish their work. And it also has a comprehensive list of resources. In fact, this agency is in there. That's just a link to my book. And then of course, you guys know Maria's book. Her book is really good. So I recommend you take a look at that. She really makes the comparison, and a lot of people have talked about this, but she really lays it out well, how a person who is trans-identified is really has a mindset of being in a cult, and you would treat them as though they were in a cult, and how would you pull them out? And so I think that this book is really beneficial. And then my children's book, Froggy Girl. It's for children, of course, so we're talking about adults. But it could be useful if they're open, depending on this, the stage of where they're at and opening up about it, to read it and or have them take a look at it. I've actually heard from another parent who, with her teenager, one way that she helped break her teenager out of, desist from being trans was to leave children's books about reality around the house. And so that was just a little strategy that she used. I don't know if that would work with your person, but I also just wanted to let you know that I wrote a really cute children's book, and I can read it to you guys if you want. But I want to leave time for questions, and so that's the end of my presentation.
Oh, thank you so much. That was fantastic. Um, Gosh, we do have a question, a couple of questions. And I just wanted, before we go to questions, oh, you're getting all these applause and look at all
I know
that.
I can't see anybody. I hate that. This is so weird. I'm just like talking to the void.
Um, I want to encourage everybody, you all got a copy of Pamela's book. for adults, please review that. When you read it, give it a review on Amazon, give it
Well,
a
thank
review
you.
on Goodreads. I cannot emphasize enough how much that means to an author to get reviews. Even, I mean, you're not going to give it negative reviews because it's a great book, but even books that get negative reviews, it bumps them up in the search ratings. So please, please, please read it and then give it a review. So, Pamela, there's a question in the chat. My daughter just started seeing an affirming therapist on her own. Any suggestions on dealing with this situation? Is it best to ignore this or to gently try to question the person's efficacy?
Oh gosh. Well, I think this is probably going to be an answer for a lot of them, but it probably depends on your relationship with her, whether you're not that you think she'll receive it. But I do think I think it's okay to ask questions about the therapist, especially if the therapist is feeding it, probably talking about you, or your daughter is probably talking about you in session. So you could maybe put it in a way that's curious how you want to be able to help and support, and then hear more about what they're doing, and ask, I would do it in a way where you're asking questions, gently challenging it without saying the affirming therapist is a quack, which they probably are. But you probably want to do it in a way where it's they can receive it. So, being a little gentle about it. But I would encourage you asking questions, and I assume you're not paying for it, or your insurance isn't covering it. It's coming from her. So if that were the case, then I think you have a little more authority over it if you were paying for it. Um, but yeah, maybe just ask them what she's getting out of the therapy, and then go from there.
Okay, that's great. Great suggestion. We've got two questions that I think they're pretty similar, so I'm going to read them both at the same time. Any advice for families who have different views but are trying to coexist with an adult trans-identified child around the holidays and etc.? I'm trying to decide what to ask for from them, even though they are uncertain. They want to respect me, sort of, but they're more progressive and want to honor my child, which stinks. And do you have any suggestions on how to deal with telling friends and family? My daughter refuses to tell them herself, and it has pushed all the questions to us. So both of these are around dealing with family, friends, the questions, the holidays, all that.
So telling friends and family that your child is trans, is that the
The
question?
the
Like,
second question, yeah, the daughter has refused. I thought these were more the same question than they actually are. Apologies.
okay.
Should have read them separately. The second one's probably a quicker answer. Do you have any suggestions on how to deal with telling friends and family? My daughter refuses to tell them herself. It has pushed all of their questions onto us.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't think you should be responsible for telling them. The only reason you might want to tell them is if you want them to know for yourself. But for her, I wouldn't do it for her. So I would think about that. What do you want them to know for yourself? Like maybe what you're going through as a result of this. So you might want to share it in that capacity. But I would, if she's an adult, that's on her. That's what I think.
I had a friend who that's exactly what the friend told their child. Like, this is your news, this is your
Yeah,
business. I don't even think this is reality, what you're doing. So, just what you said, it's not my responsibility to tell people about the fantasy that you're living in.
exactly. Okay, and
Yeah.
then the holidays, how to deal with.
Yeah. So, advice
God,
for
I wish I had a magic answer for that.
yeah, how do you deal with families who they may be more progressive and affirming the trans identity, or more just they even may be uncertain about what to do, but they want to honor the child, and you're all going to be together at the holidays.
Yeah, so again, I think it depends on the relationship with the family members, because how much you get to talk to them beforehand, because maybe you can have just more of a philosophical question with them, because I think a lot of people who want to honor, they just haven't really put a lot of thought into it, because they've heard that that's the nice thing to do. But it sounds like the way you're asking that is that they maybe have some of that questioning in them. There's something off about it, but they also think that's a mean thing to do, is to think about it in this other way. So, having that conversation with them about what they think about it generally, might help them. Um, Also, maybe again, depending on how close you are, you can talk about how it affects you and what you think, just and what your concerns are, and just in a more genuine way, that you're just, these are the things you worry about, and this is, you love your child so much, but these are some of your concerns, just so that they know. I don't think you can tell them what to do per se. But I think hopefully you have enough of an open relationship where you can have that conversation about you know, what are some of the pros and cons of affirming are, and what you believe, and then they can come in and make that decision. I'm not sure, again, culturally, I'm not sure how, and within your family, how much you can like sort of set rules or not. I don't know how much that would work out. I don't think you can do that. I mean, I honestly relate to that on a different level. I don't have a trans kid, or, I don't have that, but I have very different political views in my family, and it's difficult. And I've decided with that, I don't let them sort of get away with saying things that are just flat out lies or accusatory. Um, calling, it's been implied that I'm like a Nazi or something like that, and I don't let that slide.
Mm,
And they know how I feel about, different issues, but I also try not that to let that be the center of the conversation.
mm,
So I'm thinking that's probably the best way. And unfortunately, that ends up walking on eggshells somewhat, which is not ideal.
mm,
Um, it's hard to answer, and I think it's really think about what your relationship is, and but also think about how much you want to be true to yourself, and I think that's important. I think a lot of us are like being eaten up inside because we're self-censoring so hard, and we're all walking on eggshells so hard, and I mean, even though there are fights, like I think it sometimes is better to have a fight if you're just being honest and you're not hurting it, you're not being mean, you're not being hateful. But if you're being honest with yourself and there's still a fight, there's going to be a fight. We can't always avoid these fights. That's what I think, honestly.
yeah, that's a good point. I think we want to avoid conflict, but sometimes conflict is healthy. Sometimes you need that conflict to move into a different place. So that's
Yeah, I
good
mean,
advice.
honestly, like I'll self-disclose a little. Is this still being recorded? Oh well. Well, I had a fight with my mom recently where she started to imply that if you believe in borders, then that's like Nazi thinking, and I got really mad and I stormed out of the room, and I had no regrets. Normally I'd be like, "Oh, I shouldn't have said anything, or I should have been calmer." But I think she actually needed to see that,
Mm,
to understand that she was actually wrong. And then I gently explained why I was angry. And it wasn't because we had a difference of opinion, because I'm okay with that. It was that she was implying that I am such a bad person that I could be affiliated with Nazis. By the way, I'm
mm.
Jewish. And so, and that's what got me angry. It's the assumption that my belief is different from hers, so that makes me a bad person, that got me angry. And I know
Yeah.
that's what I think a lot of what the conflicts are around this issue too. Of course, I receive that also, not with my family, but with enough people. And
Yeah.
and I think that people need to recognize that if they love you and they care about you and they're coming to your house for a holiday, that they should give you the benefit of the doubt and recognize that you're not a bad person for having a different belief system.
Mm. That's a message that we just need to share everywhere. You're not a bad person just because you don't agree on everything.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I was really caught throughout your talk by how much you compare the trans identity
Mm.
to addiction. And I always think of it as a cult, and it is, but I really appreciated that and I resonate with that. And it's given me a little bit of a new lens to think of
Mm.
it through. And so, in light of that and comparing it with addiction, can you talk about the perspective on loving detachment? Because I've heard about that with dealing with an addict. Sometimes you just need to continue to love them, but to detach so you're not enabling it and you're not sort of letting your own life be dragged down. How can that apply or does that apply in this
That's
situation?
that's exactly it. You just articulated it better than I can. I mean, that's exactly it. There is that. I mean, there is that, and that's something that I know is a theme
Mm,
for parents of adult trans-identified kids. That they have to do that, and it's very painful.
Mm.
to do that, because they want so badly, for obvious reasons, for their child to not be caught up in this, to not be obsessed with this, to be around healthy friends and family, to be developing normally, to building a career, building a family, building friendships, having fun, and not be obsessing about what hormones they have to take that week, or what their identity is, or whether or not someone's misgendering them. These are not healthy things.
Mm.
Um, However, we can't change it because they are sort of addicted to this. They need it right now for whatever reason. And I think that's partly why I talked about emphasize the underlying reasons, because even with addicts, they need it for some reason, usually. Honestly, it's a complicated theory around addiction, but I do think that it's like they need it, and we can't always change it. We have to let go of that, and it's difficult. That, the brain, psychology, I wish I could say I had all the answers. I don't. Nobody does. That's the reality of it. And nobody knows what's gonna like click for your person that you love. No one's gonna, we don't, I don't know what's gonna be the thing. I think a lot of us have sat and listened to a lot of detransitioners talk, and you probably all know this. They all say completely different things that got them to wake up to the fact that they've been lied to this entire time, or they've experienced something that woke them up. Some of them, it happened earlier on. Some of them took 10, 15 years for that to happen. Um, and we just don't know. And that's a painful place to be in. And there is a level of like accepting that, where you're gonna have to sit with that, but also not enable it. It's hard.
I teach AP Psych at the high school level, and just a quick comment. One of the things I notice every year at the beginning of the year, the students ask me questions like, why does this happen? And why does that happen? And so often I have to say, oh, we don't know. We don't know, we don't
Mhm.
know. And they're so shocked to realize how much we do not know about the brain, how much we don't
Mhm.
know about how people think and resolve problems. And I think this issue really contains that in spades. Like there's just so much that we're trying to figure out and we don't know.
And I think it's so individual. I think that's what's so hard about this. I think that's what's so wrong about saying someone's a gender specialist, because
Mm,
you can't be a gender specialist, because everybody who gets caught in this goes into it for very different reasons, have different
mm,
different temperaments and different vulnerabilities that got them there. And so the reason I've been so frustrated as the truthful therapist is that we're no longer treating people as individuals. We're,
mm,
this one size fits all is, it doesn't work. It doesn't work on both ends. It doesn't work on trying to pull them out. It doesn't work on affirming. It just doesn't work.
mm.
Psychology has always been so individualized, sometimes to a fault, but
Yes.
still, it I really think we need to think about you need to think about your family as an individual. You need to think about the person you love as an individual, and I think the answer is really going to come within you and with the person that's dealing with it, and it's not going to come from me. I mean, I can only give you ideas.
Oh, you're very humble, but I think we have all learned a lot today. This was really, really helpful. Um, we don't have any more questions in the chat.
I see
Oh,
one
I
I'd
more.
see
like
it. I
to
see a hand
make a
up.
comment.
Sure.
I'm Charles Ramskoff. Our daughter's 19 and she's uh, identified as trans. We had an interesting conversation yesterday that might be helpful to those folks listening. We've been dealing with this for probably about 4 years now. We haven't affirmed anything. We had long story short, a Kaiser therapist for a bit, but she was just all about helping us to try to use the proper pronouns, which we rejected. Yesterday, we had a conversation about her. She's applying for jobs because she completed a animation program in Vancouver, BC, and she's very diligent, very smart, uh, and she's putting herself out there with all sorts of resumes and so forth. So my wife connected with her yesterday, and we had a broad conversation about her taking down some of the prominent, pronoun identifications at the header of all of her applications, that she was already rejected for an internship, and we're pretty sure that one of the reasons was that there seemed to be a rather sort of prominent emphasis on that. And we said, look, it doesn't matter it matters to you, but no one else. And this isn't going to help you get a job, and certainly not, in the current climate in particular. There are probably HR people that look at this and see more problems than benefit. So if you think this is somehow, you know, a badge that you need to wear, it's your personal issue, and you need to leave that in the background. Like, I wouldn't tell people, about my religious beliefs or political beliefs in a job application or on my resume in particular. And so we went into this conversation on that basis, and we told her that, I said, woke ideology and belief in that is not necessarily, a badge you may want to wear on your resume. So, and she asked me the question about, well, what do you think woke ideology is? So I went into a an explanation as best I could on that, and most of it turned into uh, an identification of what is common sense, what is rational, and what is truth. She didn't really have many comebacks for that. We stayed cordial, and we got a lot of our points in. And one of the points I wanted to make with her early on, and I've had this discussion, is that uh, her detransitioning or her desire to perhaps do that, is that something that she fears might be seen as sort of quitting, and that she's let people down who put all of this emphasis and support into her. Like, her sister's totally accepting and promotes everything about this. We have a problem with that. We have never really identified with any of it. So we
Yeah.
remain steadfast, and
That's that's
um,
that's so typical, isn't it? It's so common for siblings to affirm, and that makes it even more difficult within the home. But you raised some really good points about asking those questions that they really don't have good answers for, and I think probably that often happens in therapy too. Am I right, Pamela? Like
Mm-hmm.
putting those kinds of questions out there.
Yeah, I mean that, and I think what you did was really good. You were firm, and just asking her really honest questions. And I think she honestly heard you. Sounds like it.
I
Yeah.
think she did as well, and it remained cordial. The two good things that I think are hopeful in our case is that she's very attached to her mother. She can turn on the trans and turn it off when she wants to. So she doesn't insist on anybody in the family calling her by her trans name. And we just continue to essentially respond to that part
Mm.
of her. And I told her that it seems to me that when we talk about differences between males and females, one of the issues that's very scary for some of these trans folks is the acceptance of um, their, in our case, of their femininity. It's a daughter, and the fear that being involved with a male on some sort of relationship level is a step down, that they're going to be dominated, that somehow, their view is that um, all men are misogynists, and essentially, they're it's a transactional relationship, and they don't trust those individuals. They only trust and hang out with people that are in their sort of trans community. So
I think
it's,
that sounds a lot like what you were when in one of your early slides, you were talking about reasons why people might adopt a trans identity, and that fear of adulting or fear of relationships or fear of, yeah, being dominated. Did you have anything else, Pamela, that you can add to that?
No, I mean, I think it sounds like you're having good open conversations with her and she's receiving your feedback. I mean, what I'm hearing too is this general, like, these kids, and I'm calling them kids, but these young adults that are in this, like, they are really stunted because she doesn't want to grow up. And obsessing over trans is a great avoidance tactic for
Absolutely.
growing up and for exploring relationships, for getting closer to people, to explore your sexuality in a healthy way, you know, like just having relationships, maybe even having a first kiss. I mean, some of them have never even had a first kiss, stuff like that. Um,
Correct.
and so that's something to think about. I think you know, when we were young, that these, you know, these things, we knew that these things were uncomfortable, but we faced them head on, and now they have this way to avoid it and escape, and it's being enabled, you know, by culture, not by you guys. But so I think you're doing a great job with her, and I mean, keep listening. I would, you know, like when you're talking to her, do both, like it sounds like you're doing some like kind of lecturing. I think that, you know, it sounds like she's able to hear it, but also do some reflecting. I guess that's my therapy speak. But like, you know, I like recognize, like when you hear her say something genuine, like, oh, it's, you know, it sounds hard for you to like get close to guys, or you've told, you know, guys, sounds you've had some bad experiences with guys, like that's you know, tell me more, you know, something like that. It's tough, you know, to do more like reflecting and listening, because unfortunately they are kind of stuck in this like juvenile mindset, and they need their, it's a little bit narcissistic. We know this, like, and you know, like you're talking to a child, and but you need to talk to a child like a child so that they can grow up and help her, you know, grow out of this. So,
Yeah,
well done.
those are excellent
Thank you.
suggestions. I
Thanks.
think that's the part I keyed in on the most. That
Hmm.
we
I just put in the chat, I don't know if everyone saw it. If anyone would like to stay on the Zoom, I want to honor Pamela's time and not ask her
I'm
to
okay.
stay too long. If anyone would like to stay on just to have a discussion amongst yourselves, I know sometimes being parents of a trans-identified child, you can feel very alone. So I will be happy to keep the Zoom open. We'll unmute everybody and just make it a discussion if you would like to stay. I don't know that Pamela can stay. I don't know what your time looks like. It's
I
totally
can
up to you.
stay at least like 15 more minutes if people want me or want to pick my brain.
All right. Well, I think what I'll do, if there's no more specific
I can
questions,
stop sharing here.
I will go ahead and I'm going to turn off the recording. Um, please let me know, is it Charles? If
yes, Charles.
are you okay with with your comments being part of the recording that goes on our website, or would you like me to cut that off?
No, I don't have a problem with it.
That's okay? Okay. Well, I'm going to stop the recording now.